Hi everyone. This afternoon I'd like to test some ideas out on you to maybe shake up a bit of post-lunch fatigue that might be setting in the darkness round about now. I do my best thinking through producing projects with artists and through experiencing them. So I'm going to be taking us through a few projects in thinking out some of that new language and those ideas. I've been tasked with presenting a regional report from that small island just across the Atlantic. And I guess its proximity to New York perhaps might help us discern a few things that might be jointly at stake here in this state of emergency, if you like. There is a black cloud gathering, I think, over the UK. And we're not talking about volcanic ash here. In just 4 days' time, the international art community will converge in London for the Frieze Art Fair. In 6 days' time, the largest ever public spending review will hit a 25% cut to the arts across the board. So it's going to be pretty catastrophic. If you see rather a lot of people arriving at JFK in about 7 days' time, you'll know why from the UK. 650 days later, the London 2012 Olympics will open. And this convergence of anticipation and gloom, of expectation of international attention and domestic crisis, is resulting in what I see as a kind of polarization of public practice in the UK. The ground here of the Olympic Park, currently under construction to the east of the East End, that heart of the London art world, seems like a very good place to start when we're talking about this contradictory pull between monumentalism and critical gesture. Anish Kapoor's Arcelor orbit is proposed to rise some 115 meters above the Olympic Stadium. It's sponsored to the tune of 19 million by the world's largest steel manufacturer. And it's, of course, a really easy target for those good old British tabloids with their hysteria about the impositions of public art. But even the broadsheets, let's face it, more measured questioning of this public artwork's sustainability's credentials. Now, this scrap of paper, tagged onto a lamppost at the perimeter of the Olympic Park construction site, is the planning application notice for the orbit. It's evidence of the public consultation process, which accompanies the refining of this kind of design and build of public artworks. And for me, this is publicness being rehearsed through notification of a future triumphalist moment of topping out, if you like. Well, by contrast, this is Hilary Powell's Olympic Games. I would say tactical practices are seeming to sort of dance on the edges of the Olympic Park. This was in 2007 when Hilary Powell staged her own Olympic Games amid the contested site. So here, Ring Road becomes the running track, and then a mattress becomes a trampoline. In 2009, Lara El-Mersigui, using her customary indexical methodology, tracked the histories of the Olympic sites. Her seemingly quiet and unassuming booklet here, in actuality, to my mind, was a kind of bold riposte to the assertion that these were blank wastelands without history before the Olympic Delivery Authority arrived. And more broadly, these tactical practices, to my mind, attest to a form of artistic response to regeneration in the UK. Now, this bears some relation to work that a lot of you will know over the last 3-4 decades, such as Martha Rosler's work just some blocks from here in the Bowery, and draws on the long history of work in the UK of agitation to regeneration, exemplified, for example, by Art for Change. And we see it here in things like Free Art Collective's Function of Public Art billboard series, which kind of epitomise this artistic gesture of resistance. But this kind of work may now certainly be commissioned itself by developers and stakeholders. The Olympic Delivery Authority themselves have appointed an artist in residence, in much the same manner as a developer of a large retail shopping construction site in Bristol appointed the artist Neville Gaby over 3 years to be their artist in residence. Some 3 years ago, Situations, the programme I run in Bristol, we conducted a process of fieldwork on that same site, that construction site, with a group of 3 artists and 3 archaeologists. And we spent 24 hours on what was Europe's largest retail construction site. And the results were this kind of thing, Richard Wentworth's wonderful, witty, photographic observation, if you like. But I have to say that after those 24 hours and looking at the work the archaeologists and the artists did, I was left really with this feeling of thinking these agitations are just merely that. They're at the perimeters of these sites of regeneration. They're rather empty gestures which effectively preach to the choir. So whether perhaps, I ask myself, corporate self-aggrandizement has been replaced by a kind of ornamental self-reflexivity, a kind of navel-gazing, if you like, of the systems of regeneration, rather than projects which really inspire and capture the imagination of broader publics other than us, which might induce social change. So whilst we've been busying ourselves with that very question, the question of sanctioned monumentality versus sanctioned critical gesture, of course an alternative counterculture has already transformed the terms of that argument. So what sense does it make to speak of the monumental versus the critical gesture in public space when you experience Doris Salcedo's shibboleth at the Turbine Hall in Tate Modern as part of a flash mob silent disco? There is no doubt that what we now understand to be publicness has fundamentally changed the mobilization of publics around shared events. And it requires a change in our polarization of spectacle and critical tactical maneuver. That simply won't wash anymore, as we heard a little bit this morning. Certainly, I think we should still carry with us Guy Debord's warning in the Society of the Spectacle, that spectacle is that which shared experience is atomized. Consumption is passive and without agency. It forecloses critical distance and creates a false togetherness. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, we have to carry forward Guy Debord's notion of that. When we think about Trafalgar Square, which is so often used as sort of visual shorthand for publicness in the UK, and here this is the announcement of the 2012 Olympics. And a couple of years later, of course, it was the site for Anthony Gormley's One and the Other. For those who don't know, this was 100 days of continuous public occupation of the Fourth Plinth in Trafalgar Square. 1 hour after another, a total of 2,400 participants occupied the plinth. Now, Gormley summed up the project as follows. Whether you see the plinth as a protest or pole dance platform, studio or stocks, playpen or pulpit, as a frame for interrogation or for meditation, it has provided an open space of possibility for many to test their sense of self and how they might communicate with the wider world. For me, though, this is false democracy at its worst. As this image testifies, the experience of watching the participants was akin to an excruciating episode of Big Brother. On site, the Sky TV cameras and lights and safety net overwhelmed the visual testimonies, whether they be daft or whether they be really heartfelt. I think this turned Gormley's platform into a kind of instrument of public mockery, and the deterioration of our species we heard about yesterday was in full public view. So, what is the alternative in terms of revolutions in public practice? And surely it's not this kind of gesture, Patrick Brill's art you need, this kind of amateurism, as the only way of dealing with the instrumentalization of culture. I think instead we have to turn to the slow movement. We have to look potentially at what that tells us about drawing on local resources, sustainability, shared hospitality, and the value of communal experience. Now, certainly we have our own versions of food production, the big lunch, and food consumption, communal food consumption, from London to Glasgow to Grisdale. And I think it's interesting that this groundswell of projects is accompanied also by generally a sense of the intention for a shared experience of slowing down. It is not simply about living well, but it's about really that our sense of wanting a shared experience has fundamentally changed. And there's something very important here about public time, about the nature of sociality. And so we can see this within the profusion of pavilion projects, such as the Serpentines Pavilion or these Portavilion run across the capital throughout 2009. But of course, I think we should heed Jacques Rancière's warning that participation doesn't necessarily guarantee critical legitimacy. And I want to try and very briefly now in the last 5 minutes pull out a few characteristics that I think show this turn towards slow time. The first is a notion of duration. And in the wake of critical responses to fast and loose itinerancy of biennial curating, we've witnessed now an emergence of a new generation of durational and curatorial projects. For example, the Serpentine Gallery's Edgware Road project sees the formation of temporary communities around the centre of 4 possible studies through residencies, public events and research-led commissions. The Liverpool Biennial now has a number of public projects that extend durationally from one biennial to the next. Grisdale, from its headquarters at Lawson Park, a historic hill farm in the Lake District, has run a programme of commissions and residences characterised by a sensibility which moves away from the sometimes, I'm sorry to say, self-indulgent worthiness of sustainable rural projects. But also mindful that such projects require a particular type of curatorial and artistic commitment, I also recognise the value of interruption in durational time. For one of the most remarkable projects of recent years was Ruth Ewan's Did You Kiss the Foot That Kicked You?, in which 100 buskers were deployed by the artist around the City of London playing The Ballad of Accounting by Ewan MacColl, which is a litany of calls for social justice, and commuters heard this from one place to the next. Over 100 different buskers, if you can imagine. The artist said the song's urgent tones communicate an anxiety, but no one is actually listening. And finally, accumulation. So how might we bring together duration with interruption? Some of our most recent projects at Situations have involved the formation of temporary communities around particular events over time. This is the Black Cloud by Heather and Ivan Morrison, which was constructed through a community barn raising. And the structure acted as part remarkable sculptural intervention, part host for debates and discussions on sustainable futures, including the Morrison's house truck, part performance venue and gathering point. In the Black Cloud, we saw the coming together of a desire for a remarkable site or monumental gesture, with that desire for a shared experience and a time for critical engagement. This was inspired by a project that I was involved with in New Zealand with 15 other curatorial colleagues entitled One Day Sculpture, which told of the ways in which you could bring together both the epic and the remarkable with also the critical. I want to finish with a very different imagining of 2012. Imagine you are standing on a stony beach. Yeah. Hey, on the southernmost tip of the British Isles. The wind's up and you're looking out towards France. Around the headland emerges an island, long and low, comprising rock and granite, somehow resembling a piece of the moon, strange and alien in this Jurassic coast, and pulled slowly by a tugboat. This is Nowhere Island, an Arctic island revealed from within the melting ice of a retreating glacier in Svalbard, and it was discovered by artist Alex Hartley. It will be sailed into international waters, and in the summer of 2012, it will become a micronation, making its way as one landscape around another around the southwest coast of England. This is our Cultural Olympiad project, a riposte to the monolithic intervention in the public space and an epic endeavour. Thank you.